Today, we are cracking open one of the most infamous experiments in the history of psychology. It's a study that, for decades, pretty much defined our understanding of good and evil, only for us to find out that the story we were all told was, well, a carefully constructed lie. So let me just start by asking you a really provocative question. Do you think a bad situation could make you, a good person, do cruel things? Could it turn you into a monster? It's a really unsettling thought, right? But it's the exact question that's at the heart of the Stanford Prison Experiment.
You see, back in 1971, a psychologist at Stanford University wanted to answer that very question. And in doing so, he created an experiment so shocking, it became an absolute legend. I mean, this is the kind of thing you read about in every single Psych 101 textbook across the globe.
So this psychologist, Philip Zimbardo, had a big question on his mind. He looked at the shocking brutality inside American prisons and wondered, is this happening because the guards are just naturally sadistic people? Or is it the prison environment itself that corrupts otherwise good people? To figure this out, he recruited 24 male college students. But here's the thing, it wasn't just anyone. He put them through extensive psychological screening and picked only the most stable, mature, and law-abiding guys he could find. These were, for all intents and purposes, good kids, and that was the entire point. Right from the jump, this experiment was designed for maximum psychological impact. I mean, the prisoners were literally arrested from their homes by actual police officers, strip-searched, and forced to wear these demeaning smocks. They weren't even called by their names, just numbers. And the guards? They got uniforms, batons, and those mirrored sunglasses, to make them anonymous and give them this unquestionable authority. Now, this experiment was supposed to last for 2 full weeks. It didn't even make it through 1. The whole thing just descended into genuine cruelty and psychological torment with, frankly, stunning speed. This timeline just shows how fast it all went off the rails. Day 1 is just processing, getting them settled. By day 2, the prisoners were already rebelling, and the guards are hitting back with psychological abuse. By day 3, one of the prisoners is having what looks like a total mental breakdown. It literally took an outsider, Zimbardo's own girlfriend, to walk in on day 5, see the horror of what was happening, and convince him to shut the whole thing down. After the prisoners tried to barricade themselves in their cells on that second day, you can just see the mental switch flip in the guards. They stopped seeing their fellow students. All they saw were dangerous threats that had to be controlled, and that's when the abuse really started to ramp up. 36 hours, that's it. That's how long it took for this experiment to produce its first and most famous piece of evidence that the situation was all-powerful. Prisoner Douglas Korpi, who was only known as number 8612, appeared to have a complete and total mental breakdown. He was screaming, crying, just absolutely losing it. He had to be released, and his emotional collapse, well, that became the undeniable proof of Zimbardo's whole idea. And for decades, that was the story. That was the takeaway. It was powerful, it was simple, and honestly, it was pretty terrifying. Good people, when you put them in an evil place, will do evil things. We all have this monster lurking inside of us, just waiting for the right circumstances to come out. Okay, but this is where the story you think you know takes a very, very sharp turn. Because in recent years, thanks to researchers digging through Zimbardo's own archives, it's become clear that the story we all learned was, to put it bluntly, a fraud. So the legend says the guards' sadism just bubbled up to the surface on its own. It was a natural response. But recently released recordings from the experiment, they tell a completely different story. It turns out the researchers were actually telling the guards how to be cruel. And just look at this. This is a direct quote from Philip Zimbardo himself, talking to the guards before the experiment even started. He wasn't some neutral observer just watching things unfold. He was the director, actively creating the very abuse he later claimed to be studying. So what about that dramatic breakdown? The poster child for the experiment's terrifying power? Well, it turns out that Douglas Korpi, prisoner number 8612, was acting. Yeah. He desperately wanted to leave because he had to study for his grad school exams, and when they wouldn't let him quit, he faked a breakdown because he saw it as his only way out. So the single most important piece of the experiment's narrative, that shocking moment that made it so famous, it wasn't real. It was just manufactured by a student who was worried about his grades and wanted to get back to his books. And believe me, the problems run even deeper. It's likely the participants were just playing roles they thought they were supposed to play, kind of like actors who've seen too many prison movies. Zimbardo himself later admitted that acting as both the lead researcher and the prison superintendent was a huge conflict of interest. And even the newspaper ad asking for volunteers for a prison study probably attracted a certain type of person to begin with. So you have to ask, right? If the study was a scientific mess, just filled with coaching and acting and all these flaws, why is it still one of the most famous experiments in history? Well, the simple reason is it's just such a compelling story. It's dramatic, it's shocking, and despite being widely debunked, analyses of psychology textbooks show that the vast majority of them still present the experiment's original conclusions as fact, with maybe a tiny mention of ethical concerns, but almost nothing about these massive scientific flaws. And this right here illustrates the problem perfectly. In 2002, researchers at the BBC tried to replicate the study, but this time, crucially, they didn't coach the guards. And what happened? The exact opposite. The prisoners didn't break down. They organized. They came together and they successfully challenged the guards' authority. So, after all of this, what's the real lesson here? It turns out the experiment's true value, its real takeaway, has absolutely nothing to do with some dark, hidden evil lurking inside all of us. Instead, what it really is a powerful cautionary tale. It's about how easily bad science can take hold. It shows us the immense ethical responsibility that researchers have. And maybe most importantly, it proves just how powerful a good story can be. So powerful that it can completely overshadow the truth for decades. And really, that leaves us with one final big question. The story of the Stanford Prison Experiment was accepted as solid scientific truth for almost 50 years. So, what other truths that shape how we see the world might just deserve a second look?